Imagine that was Mr. Depp saying that to Ms. Heard on that recording. Let's play one more.
That fake laugh. That fake laugh is too much to take.
No, I'm sure she's...
That fake laugh is so disgusting.
I'm sure she's great. I'm sure she's great.
I think you can give me some of the best performances in
No,
the
you're right, I don't. It's all about performance.
It's about performance. How am I? I don't regret. I don't regret.
Oh, what else? What else are you doing? Oh, come on. Come on. Lay it on me. What else? What else other things you want to add? You fucking lying piece of what? Oh, no, I want to know.
Get out your Ubers out.
I'm gonna waiting. Go get it.
Yeah, I'm being
Wait, is there no other place for you to run in your 15 other houses to go run? Come on, go be a real married man. Go deal with your shit the way that a man does. Go run to the next house. Every man does.
Yeah.
Go. Run away.
This is the real Ms. Heard, the one in the audio recordings, not the one you saw in this courtroom. What you didn't hear on a single recording you heard in this case, and there were many played by both parties, is Mr. Depp ever admitting to hitting, punching, or kicking Ms. Heard. You didn't hear it. It doesn't exist. It didn't happen. And despite the fact that Mr. Depp and Ms. Heard are heard discussing many of the alleged incidents you've heard about at this trial, like Australia and the Bahamas, you never heard Ms. Heard accuse Mr. Depp of sexual assault. Unlike Mr. Depp, who you heard admit to and own up to his past mistakes and his struggles, particularly with drugs and alcohol, Ms. Heard will not admit that she has ever done anything wrong. But she cannot deny what you heard on those recordings. As much as Ms. Heard and her lawyers have tried to make this case about Mr. Depp's language, it is Ms. Heard that repeatedly admits to violence. By April and May of 2016, Mr. Depp had reached his limit. His mother was dying. His finances were a mess. And when he showed up late to Ms. Heard's 30th birthday party because a meeting with his new business manager, Edward White, had gone late, Ms. Heard, of course, was not understanding. She was furious. You heard from Mr. Depp, both in this courtroom and on audio recordings, that Ms. Heard punched him that evening. He left with Travis McGivern, and the next morning he learned that someone had left feces on his bed. Ms. Heard denies responsibility, but she admitted to the prank to Starling Jenkins. You heard him testify to that effect. For almost a month after that, they didn't see each other. And you heard from Mr. Depp that when his mother died on May 20th, 2016, he resolved to leave Ms. Heard. He was done. And when Ms. Heard learned that Mr. Depp was done, that she was really losing him, she went on the attack. She filed for divorce before Mr. Depp could. Then, as you heard from Mr. Depp's divorce lawyer, Laura Wasser, Ms. Heard sent a letter demanding financial support. And when her demands weren't met, Ms. Heard struck a blow against Mr. Depp that was more damaging than any physical blow she had ever landed. When she walked into court 6 years ago today, on May 27th, 2016, to get a domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp, she did so in front of paparazzi with a mark on her face. The evidence presented at this trial demonstrates that Ms. Heard didn't just want a divorce. She wanted to ruin him. Ms. Heard denied alerting TMZ to the TRO filing in this courtroom. But you heard testimony from Morgan Tremaine that TMZ knew to go to the courthouse, knew what side of her face the alleged bruise was on, and that Ms. Heard would pause. She would pause for paparazzi, who got the photos that ended up splashed across newspapers and magazines. Ms. Heard testified that she did not personally give photographs of her apparent injuries to People magazine, but somehow these pictures that she took and maintained on her devices ended up on the cover of People magazine 1 month later. In the end, she walked away with $7 million without any tax liabilities, which she said she was donating to two charities, the ACLU and the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. The ACLU, they got less than $1 million from her. And the Children's Hospital, they got $250,000. But that didn't stop Ms. Heard from telling the world that she donated everything, because remember, she wanted nothing. And she had donated everything. The word donated. And that didn't stop her from testifying under the penalty of perjury that she had donated it. Ms. Heard tried to tell you that pledge and donate mean the same thing. She claims she hasn't given the money because she was sued, but you've heard uncontested evidence that she had the money for 13 months prior to this lawsuit being commenced by Mr. Depp. She had all the money and had month after month after month to fulfill her pledge and actually donate the money. But she didn't. She also told you that she never fulfilled the pledge because Mr. Depp sued her for defamation. That's a blatant lie. It was Ms. Heard who fired the first shot after the divorce was finalized, when she sought to initiate an arbitration against Mr. Depp for defamation 3 months before the op-ed was even published, and 6 months before Mr. Depp filed this lawsuit. Not only does this contradict Ms. Heard's excuse for not making donations, it contradicts her narrative that she just wants to move on with her life, that she just wants Mr. Depp to leave her alone. Lies. That is Ms. Heard's narrative. Lies upon lies.
There actually were all kinds of accusations flying your way when you said all this, and then there was a divorce settlement. You got $7 million. People were saying this is all about the money, but then you did something that twisted that whole argument. What did you do with that money?
$7 million in total was donated to, I split it between the ACLU and Children's Hospital of Los Angeles.
ACLU is a human rights organization.
Sorry, ACLU is a prominent organization, nonprofit organization in the United States. Yeah. It's called the American Civil Liberties Union, and they work on behalf of marginalized communities on the ground and in legislative reform.
Right.
And
well, more power to you, because that's something that I've never heard of.
I wanted nothing.
When you catch Ms. Heard in a lie, she tries to cover it up with more lies. So let's talk about the giant lie at the heart of this case. Ms. Heard's claim that Mr. Depp is an abusive monster and that she is a public figure representing domestic abuse. At the start of this case, Mr. Chu and I told you that you were going to hear some disturbing and graphic tales of abuse from Ms. Heard, and they were designed to shock you and overwhelm you, which you have. We told you that this would be a performance, the role of her lifetime, as a heroic survivor of brutal abuse. When Mr. Depp brought this case for defamation, Ms. Heard went all in. She spun a story of shocking, overwhelming, brutal abuse. She came into this courtroom prepared to give the performance of her life, and she gave it. Ms. Heard's acting coach, Christina Sexton, testified that Ms. Heard has difficulty crying when she is acting. You saw it. Ms. Heard sobbing without tears, while spinning elaborate, exaggerated, fantastical accounts of abuse and everything going on in her mind almost a decade prior while enduring that abuse. It was a performance. She told you that what she thinks about she told you what she thinks you need to hear to convict this man as a domestic abuser and a rapist. She wants you to believe that she was abused countless times over the entire course of their relationship. But as Mr. Chu and I promised you, the evidence just does not bear that out. Ms. Heard has told you that she has mountains of evidence of abuse, but there are no medical records reflecting she sustained any injuries from the abuse she claims. Ms. Heard had medical professionals at her disposal. Dr. Kipper, Debbie Lloyd, her own nurse, Erin Filati, and yet there's nothing. Ms. Heard took pictures all the time. Pictures of Mr. Depp sleeping. Pictures of cocaine. Pictures of property damage. Pictures of herself. And as an actress, she was photographed all the time. Where are the pictures of the horrific injuries Ms. Heard describes? Ms. Heard also took audio recordings and videos frequently. Where are the videos of Mr. Depp attacking her? Where are the audio recordings of Mr. Depp admitting to or apologizing for physical abuse? There are none. What Ms. Heard has, and what you've seen multiple times, is a video of Mr. Depp banging some cabinets around in a kitchen. A video that, based on the testimony you heard from Morgan Tremaine, the former TMZ employee, Ms. Heard seems to have sold to TMZ right before she was deposed in connection with her divorce from Mr. Depp. Sure, Ms. Heard can point to text messages where Mr. Depp is apologizing to her, but never for violence. Ms. Heard's counsel showed you Defendant's Exhibit 325, where Mr. Depp says sorry for, quote, my behavior. I'm a fucking savage. But this is not an apology for physical violence. It's an apology for the, quote, these heinous, slinging insults. Mr. Depp is apologizing for the words he used. Unlike Ms. Heard, who you heard apologizing for physical violence in multiple audio recordings, you have never heard that from Mr. Depp, because he never used physical violence against Ms. Heard. Ms. Heard told you that Mr. Depp started abusing her right from the very beginning of her relationship, starting at the beginning of 2012. But she has repeatedly testified under oath differently to having spent a year of bliss with Mr. Depp before he ever laid a hand on her. And now, in this courtroom, she has suddenly erased an entire year of magic. She wants you to believe that instead of hitting her after a year of magic, Mr. Depp was hitting her immediately. The good times she has testified to about repeatedly in the past apparently never happened. And with the good times erased, Ms. Heard wants you to believe that she gave Mr. Depp a big knife that said, hasta la muerte, until death, to the man who supposedly would get drunk and high and beat her. Ms. Heard admitted to you during this trial that Mr. Depp always wears big, chunky rings on every finger. According to her, he was wearing these rings when he'd slap her, hit her, punch her in the face. But you have not seen a single photograph that reflects the serious injuries Ms. Heard would have sustained if this was true. Not one. Ms. Heard testified to an incident in March 2013 when Mr. Depp supposedly hit her multiple times in the face while wearing rings. And this is what her face looked like afterwards. Ms. Heard testified to an incident in Russia where she claims Mr. Depp whacked her in the face and gave her a bloody nose. She didn't take pictures of her bloody nose, but her photograph was taken on that trip, and this is what she looked like. Ms. Heard told you that there was an incident the night of the Met Gala in May 2014 when Mr. Depp supposedly whacked Ms. Heard in the face, leaving her with a red, discolored, and swollen nose that she felt was broken. Ms. Heard didn't show you any photographs of these alleged injuries, but photographs were taken of her the following night, and there were no visible injuries to Ms. Heard's face. Ms. Heard testified that in January 2015, while she and Mr. Depp were in Tokyo, Mr. Depp knelt on her back so aggressively that she was concerned that bruises would be visible in her backless dress. Here's Ms. Heard in that backless dress. Ms. Heard testified that after an incident in December 2015, she had 2 black eyes, a broken nose, and chunks of hair missing. The assault was allegedly so violent that there was blood left all over the pillows, and Mr. Depp had broken the bed frame. Pictures were taken of that bed frame. And in that picture, there appears to be a pocket knife on the bed. And that picture fails to capture the bloody pillows. And here is what Ms. Heard looked like on the James Corden show the next day. Indeed, you heard from Ms. Heard's own nurse, Erin Filati, that she saw her a day or two afterwards and could not visualize the injuries Ms. Heard described. Ms. Heard did take pictures of herself after this alleged incident. But are the injuries reflected in these photographs consistent? That's the question. Are they consistent with the brutal assault and serious injuries Ms. Heard has testified to? Or are these injuries more consistent with Mr. Depp's testimony that he and Ms. Heard bumped heads while he was trying to restrain Ms. Heard to keep her from attacking him? Out of Australia, where Mr. Depp sustained the most serious injury from his relationship with Ms. Heard spun a story of horror. A 3-day ordeal with a drug-fueled Mr. Depp violently assaulting her, cutting his own finger off, dragging her through glass, and then bending her back over a counter and raping her with a whiskey bottle. She claimed that she had bruises on her face, cuts all over her arms and feet, and was bleeding from her vagina from the sexual assault. And what did Ms. Heard say she did? She went upstairs, took some sleeping pills, and went to sleep. The next morning, she took pictures of the mirrors her husband had written on in paint using his amputated finger. She took no pictures of herself, her alleged injuries, or the property damage she testified to in this courtroom. When Malcolm Connolly, Jerry Judge, Dr. Kipper, and Nurse Debbie Lloyd arrived to extract Mr. Depp and get him medical treatment for his finger injury, you heard from Mr. Connolly, Dr. Kipper, and Ms. Lloyd. All of them testified they did not observe any injuries to Ms. Heard, and no one, including Ms. Heard, testified that she sought medical treatment. You also heard from Ben King. He also saw Ms. Heard right after this alleged incident. He flew home with her to Los Angeles. He testified that Ms. Heard didn't want to leave, that she said, I can't leave. It will be the end if I leave. He also testified that once they did leave for Los Angeles, Ms. Heard asked him if he ever got so mad he just lost it. When Ms. Heard arrived in Los Angeles, she saw Travis McGivern, who also testified he observed no injuries, and her personal nurse, Erin Filati, who documented no requests for medical treatment and no injuries in her nursing notes for Ms. Heard. You heard from Mr. Depp's sister, Christy, that she also saw Ms. Heard when she arrived back to Los Angeles and observed no injuries on Ms. Heard. Christy testified that when she told Ms. Heard her fighting with Mr. Depp was unsustainable, Ms. Heard responded that Christy should get off her cross, that Mr. Depp liked her feisty. Ms. Heard's testimony about what occurred in Australia just doesn't add up. That's because there was a monster in that house in Australia, but it wasn't Mr. Depp. It was Ms. Heard. Other than Ms. Heard's testimony, all the evidence you've seen in this trial shows that it was Ms. Heard who attacked and grievously wounded Mr. Depp when she threw a vodka bottle at him, severing his finger. Mr. Depp told Dr. Kipper that when Dr. Kipper arrived to treat Mr. Depp's finger. You've seen the pictures of the bar area in Australia with the broken vodka bottles on the ground and trails of blood drops on the floor and a bloody tissue on the floor. You've heard from Ben King that the tip of Mr. Depp's finger was found in the same bar area. And you heard from Dr. Gilbert that the injury to Mr. Depp's finger could have been caused exactly as he described. And interestingly, you heard from Christina Sexton that Ms. Heard told her that Mr. Depp injured his finger while swinging a bottle around. Not smashing a phone, as Ms. Heard surmised in this courtroom, but swinging a bottle around. You also heard from Ms. Sexton that Ms. Heard first told her about the bottle rape in Australia while Ms. Sexton was at Ms. Heard's home, meeting with her lawyers, the day before Ms. Sexton was scheduled to be deposed in this case. The evidence presented at this trial shows that this is not the only time that Ms. Heard disclosed a sexual assault at a convenient time for purposes of litigation she's involved in. The first time Ms. Heard claimed that Mr. Depp sexually assaulted her in the Bahamas in December 2015 was after Tara Roberts, the manager of Mr. Depp's island, submitted a sworn statement in the UK action describing the incident she testified to in this courtroom, where Ms. Heard chased Mr. Depp out of the house, was yelling and then pleading with Mr. Depp to stay while clawing at his hair and clothes, and left Mr. Depp with an injury to his face. That's the first time she disclosed it, after there was contrary evidence. Ms. Heard testified about another incident just 2 weeks after the events in Australia, where Mr. Depp supposedly attacked Ms. Heard and almost pushed her sister Whitney down the stairs. Whitney is the only witness that you heard from that backs up Ms. Heard's version of events. She's it. And the only witness, other than Ms. Heard, who claims to have seen Mr. Depp physically attack Ms. Heard. But just like Ms. Heard's version of the events in Australia, her testimony about the staircase incident and that of her sister Whitney's just doesn't square up with the other evidence in this trial. Their testimony is contradicted by the testimony of Travis McGivern and Debbie Lloyd, who were there that night. Ms. Heard and Whitney testified that Mr. Depp threw a Red Bull can that hit or almost hit Ms. Lloyd. Ms. Lloyd testified that never happened. Mr. McGivern testified that it was Ms. Heard who threw a can at Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard testified that Whitney was between her and Mr. Depp when she punched him. Mr. McGivern testified that he was the one between Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp when Ms. Heard punched Mr. Depp. Ms. Heard testified that Mr. Depp was able to get his hands in her hair, yank her, and then hit her in the face with the cast he had on. But you heard from Ms. Lloyd and Dr. Colbert, Mr. Depp's medical doctor, who treated Mr. Depp's finger injury, that Mr. Depp's finger was in a delicate state. He had a pin in his finger, a skin graft, and a soft cast that immobilized Mr. Depp's 2 middle fingers. And tellingly, the only picture of an injury from this incident is of Mr. Depp with a shiner. And then we have May 21st, 2016. Ms. Heard testified that Mr. Depp threw a phone at her face, causing a visible injury. Ms. Heard has shown you pictures she claims to show this injury. But these photographs are not to be trusted. You heard from Mr. Neumeister that like many of the photographs Ms. Heard has presented in this case, these photos were stored in a photo editing application. And these photos show signs of manipulation. These 2 photographs were taken at the exact same time and have the exact same file name. But they are visually different. One shows significantly more redness on Ms. Heard's face than the other, which doesn't show any injury at all. Ms. Heard testified that the difference is explained by turning on a light. But there is no way Ms. Heard could have taken a picture, turned on a light, and then taken another picture with every hair in the exact same place within the same second. It's impossible. Moreover, you heard from multiple witnesses, including Officer Melissa Sines, Officer Tyler Haddon, and Officer William Gatlin, Isaac Baruch, Alejandro Romero, who saw Ms. Heard on or after May 21st and saw no injuries to her face before she showed up to that courthouse with a mark on May 27th. And the very next day, after Ms. Heard walked into court with what appeared to be a bruise on her face to obtain a domestic violence restraining order against Mr. Depp, Ms. Heard was photographed laughing with her best friend, fresh-faced, with no bruise on her face. The mountain of evidence that Mr. Depp abused Ms. Heard is simply not there. What we have is a mountain of unproven allegations that are wild, over the top, and implausible. And you can't pick and choose which of these wild allegations to believe and which ones to disregard. You either believe all of it or none of it. Either Mr. Depp sexually assaulted Ms. Heard with a bottle in Australia, or Ms. Heard got up on that stand in front of all of you and made up that horrific tale of abuse. Either she's a victim of truly horrific abuse, or she is a woman who is willing to say absolutely anything. It is disturbing to think that Ms. Heard would make up the horrific tales of abuse that she testified to in this courtroom. But this case doesn't come down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp. This case comes down to whether you believe Ms. Heard or you believe Mr. Depp, Christy Dombrowski, Sean Bett, Malcolm Connolly, Travis McGivern, Starling Jenkins, Keenan Wyatt, Dr. Kipper, nurses Debbie Lloyd and Erin Filati, Tara Roberts, Ben King, Kate James, Kate Moss, Dr. Colber, Morgan Knight, Morgan Tremaine, Officers Melissa Sines, Officers Tyler Haddon, Officer William Gatlin, and Beverly Leonard. What Ms. Heard testified to in this courtroom is the story of far too many women. But the overwhelming evidence and weight of that evidence shows that it is not her story. It's not Ms. Heard's story. It was an act of profound cruelty, not just to Mr. Depp, but to true survivors of domestic abuse. For Ms. Heard to hold herself out as a public figure representing domestic abuse. It was false, it was defamatory, and it caused irreparable harm. And to talk more about that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague and my friend, Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Camille. Logistics are not our strong suit.